Hi, this is Scott Allen from Honolulu, Hawaii. Welcome to the Candid Frame.
Standards of beauty and style have come to be defined and spread through photography, resulting in fads and trends being embraced globally. But many of these standards of beauty have proven more exclusionary than inclusive. Some of the very things that make us uniquely human have been labeled as ugly and undesirable. Sophie Mayanne's photography runs counter to that pursuit of idealized perfection. Her photographs are beautiful not because she renders her subjects as perfect. Instead, she celebrates blemishes and flaws by allowing them to just be. In her series, Behind the Scars, she creates portraits of people whose scars have come from surgeries, accidents, illnesses, and even self-harm. Rather than hiding these marks, her subjects reveal their scars and themselves to Sophie and her camera.
What I was seeing kind of time and time again is that it was just a scar. A lot of the time the person's face wasn't shown in the photo, or they were turned away from the camera. So it was like even the images were kind of reinforcing this idea that the person should be hidden or shouldn't be proud of them. So from the beginning of the project as well, I was very much, if I'm going to do these photos, they have to be of the person as well.
Sophie's approach to photographing the human body has changed her style of fashion and beauty photography. She's turned away from an over-reliance on photo manipulation and retouching and embraced an approach that remains true to who she wants to be as a photographer and as a person.
Most of the people I've worked with are very aware of the way I work. There's been points where I probably have lost jobs because of it, but then I've also gained work at the same time because people appreciate the way I work and they want to kind of honour that as well or bring that into their brand. But yeah, it was definitely it was a big decision at the time, but it's definitely one I'm glad I did.
We'll talk to Sophie about how her project has impacted the many subjects she has photographed for her series and how her creative choices continue to change her photography. This is Ibarian X, and welcome back to the Candid Frame. I've been following your work on Instagram, and it's really been amazing stuff that you've been doing with the Scar series. I want to talk a lot about that, but I'm also kind of interested in how you got into not only photography, but particularly in the sort of the fashion portrait area.
Yeah. So when I first started taking photographs, I took a series of self-portraits. So it was around the time where kind of a lot of people were using Flickr. You know those projects like one self-portrait a day? I think they were very on trend at the time, so I thought I'd give one a go. Before that, I was kind of painting. So I've always been quite artistic, but I thought I'd pick up a camera, kind of give it a go. And I just kind of experimented and just learned how to use a camera, really. And then I think I'd taken around 200 portraits. I was in university at the time, and my university lecturer basically just said to me, he was like, "You look like a girl who just sits in her room taking photos of herself," which essentially is what I was doing. But I think that kind of gave me a nudge to kind of step outside from doing that and actually start photographing other people. So I started finding kind of people at university, friends that would let me take photos of them. I had some of them running around in the snow and all sorts. So luckily I had some really good friends that let me do that. I think I must have had a portfolio probably only about 15 to 20 kind of strong images of friends from university. And I saw a post on Facebook. So a new kind of modelling agency in London was setting up, and they were looking for photographers to test their models. So I sent my portfolio into them thinking, it's worth a shot. They might kind of let me, take photos of a few of their models. Luckily, they did like my images. So that summer, I pretty much photographed pretty much every day. So kind of every new face that they took on, I would do portraits of. And in the beginning, to be completely honest, I didn't really know what I was doing, and I was probably learning more from the models, just in terms of like posing and kind of working with new people. I was also quite shy at the time as well, so I've definitely kind of developed socially with photography. So yeah, no, I did that, and then I kind of said to the agency, can I use some of the models to start kind of submitting editorials? I think I did my first editorial that summer. Looking back at it now, it's not my best work. There's definitely some dodgy lighting and editing, and the fashion's a bit questionable. But yeah, I kind of just kept going, and I was quite kind of relentless, I think. I kept shooting, kept trying, kept asking people to let me shoot for them. Some people gave me a chance, other people didn't. And yeah, so I was, kind of just went in all guns blazing, really.
And I commend you for that, because a lot of people give themselves the excuse of not having enough experience, not having the ideal portfolio, not having the right equipment, keep them from pursuing it.
Yeah.
Was it the fact that you just were kind of naive and didn't know any better that allowed you to just go in like that?
I think I was just like, there's no harm in trying. And, I probably could have sent out hundreds of emails and maybe only 10% of the people replied. But it was only those few people that kind of gave me a chance that allowed me to build an editorial portfolio. And, once you've done a few, you kind of do a few more, and each one you do, you get a bit better, and as to the people you're working with as well. So I was quite lucky in that I found a team quite early on that I worked really well with. So we were able to kind of grow together, explore new concepts, probably get a bit more adventurous as well. And yeah, obviously people started to trust us and let us shoot things. I did an internship as well at Boys by Girls in my second year at university, and I started kind of shooting for them afterwards, and actually ended up being digital editor there for a couple of years as well. So that also kind of taught me a lot about being the other side as well. So I kind of learned a lot about why maybe your work is getting turned down, and it's not personal ever, really. Right. It's just whether it fits the magazine at the time or it's right for them. And I think you have to learn your work as well. So, if I go and submit to my work to a magazine that's really kind of glossy and edits their images a lot, chances are I'm probably not going to get commissioned by them.
Have you always had that attitude with other aspects of your life where you go, well, let me just try it, and not really think yourself and convince yourself to not do something?
So I think my personality is probably actually quite stubborn. And I'm not always very good with criticism. Probably since I was a child. I'm a lot better now. I kind of take things as a pinch of salt. Yeah, I guess partly. But then I think when I was like a teenager, I was probably a lot more shy, maybe, and didn't go out and kind of do all of the things I wanted to do. But then you're a teenager at that point anyway, so you're still kind of exploring. But yeah, I think it's probably part of my personality that I'm kind of like, I'm just going to give it a go. And yes, I like, it does affect me personally sometimes when people don't like your work, or sometimes you have shoots that you put like your heart and soul into and they just don't ever get seen, or they get dropped, or they just don't happen. But I think the more you do, probably the kind of harder your skin gets, I guess. You kind of get more used to it. So it's probably developed with time as well, I think.
The genre of photography that you practice is very competitive. And, when you started getting work and people start liking what you were doing and giving you opportunities in editorial, do you have moments when you started thinking about the fact that you were competing with people who had gone to university, who had much more experience to you? Did that sort of raise moments of insecurity, self-doubt, and how did you handle it?
I think it does even now. So I think sometimes, one of the worst things you can do sometimes is go and look at another photographer's work and compare your work to it, because they're not you anyway. But yeah, even now sometimes I kind of see other photographers and they get commissions and I'm kind of like, oh gosh, I wish I had that. Why don't I get that? And it is very easy to kind of sometimes focus on what other people are being able to do and just kind of completely forgetting what you've actually achieved. So sometimes I can be very guilty of doing that. And one of the people that is actually the best with that is my mum, because she normally sits me down and she's like, you're being stupid, look at what you've actually done. And she's like, you know, other photographers are probably looking at you as well and being like, well, why she got that job or done that shoot and I haven't got it, kind of thing. So it definitely works both ways. But I think it's really like managing kind of, don't compare yourself to other people. I think it's okay to look at other people for inspiration and just kind of being very aware of what's going on in the industry and what people are doing, but not to put yourself down if someone else is doing better than you are at that point in time, because, you know, 6 months down the line it could be the other way around.
What's fascinating about your work, and I've read other people comment about it, is that your images have a very genuine quality to them.
Yeah.
And in fashion, genuineness seems to be something that's only been adopted rather recently. You know, where before it was this idealized, perfect image of what a person is supposed to look like, especially someone who's being photographed for the purposes of selling and marketing fashion.
Yeah.
The tendency is, and I've seen it a lot with photographers who want to shoot in fashion, is that they adopt the sensibility and the look of what they're seeing in the magazines and in the advertisements. Yeah. So how, and you know, you're still fairly young, so how did you come to sort of embrace the way that you were shooting and not end up compromising your own sensibility in order to fit what the mold of what people suppose should be fashion style photography?
Yeah. When I was first shooting fashion, I was doing what everyone else does, really. I edited my images how I thought I should be editing them. So I removed spots, I edited models' jawlines, pulled people in, you know, and I was looking at the magazines as well, and I thought that was how my work was supposed to be. And I was still kind of shooting fashion when I started the Behind the Scars project. And a few months later, I was at a bit of a conflict, really, because the images from Behind the Scars have always been really honest and I haven't retouched the people in them, but I was still kind of creating fashion work that was sending out a completely different message. And also then around that time as well, a model I'd kind of photographed probably a few years beforehand put up a post on Facebook, and she basically kind of shared, so she'd had inpatient treatment for anorexia, and she's just shared her story there. And I remember when I shot her that I'd edited her images and I'd kind of pulled her in a little bit, edited her skin. And it was that point that I kind of realised that I didn't want to be part of that anymore. You know, I felt that I'd kind of personally contributed to that. And you know, I was also kind of like looking at my Instagram at the time, and I was like, there's a lot of young people that follow my work, and it's like, you know, what kind of message am I sending to those people? I'm kind of saying, you know, like, it's okay for me to take this portrait and not edit people, but if you want any chance of being in a fashion editorial, I'm still going to edit you. And it was it was hypocritical of me, really. So it's at that point, so this was in 2017, and I kind of sat down. I remember speaking to my mum and I was like, if I go out and say that I'm not doing this anymore, am I just going to completely ruin my career? Are people not going to hire me? Am I going to be too scary to work with for brands? You know, can I do this at this point in my career? Obviously, I did do it. And since then, most of the people I've worked with are very aware of the way I work. There's been points where I probably have lost jobs because of it, but then I've also gained work at the same time because people appreciate the way I work and they want to kind of honour that as well or bring that into their brand. But yeah, it was definitely kind of It was a big decision at the time, but it's definitely one I'm glad I did.
When you were talking to your mom about it, what was the advice or the comment that you made?
So whenever I talk to my mum about things, our conversation normally goes something like, I tell her what I'm planning on doing, and she normally responds with, I don't know why you're asking me because you've already made the decision. Which I think I've been that way since I was a child.
So you just have you use her as a sounding board.
Yeah. It's still good to kind of have her opinion. But yeah, a lot of the time I kind of have made the decision in my mind. It's just good to kind of have someone to be like, yes, that's a good idea, or no, you're being absolutely nuts. What are you doing? And she's normally one or the other, but the comment she normally makes first is the one I've just said. So
when you made that decision, had you already started the Behind the Scars project?
Yes, yeah. So I'd already started Behind the Scars at that point. But with Behind the Scars, so from the very beginning of that project, I knew I didn't want to edit people in it because the message was, they were honest portraits of people, and I didn't want to kind of mess with people. I just wanted them as they were. But I was still kind of shooting fashion work that was still edited. Not as edited as it was when I first started, but it still kind of fitted the mold, I guess.
So the Behind the Scars project, for the people who have not had a chance to look at the images, are a series of portraits of people who sit for you and reveal their scars, and which you photograph, but they also tell the stories behind how they made these scars. And this project started off as an editorial assignment. Can you tell me a little bit about how the assignment came to you and what were the parameters of it?
Basically, we were kind of asked at the time, so me and my team, to contribute to a magazine. They sent us a brief, and the brief was around the idea of history. And scars was something I kind of wanted to explore for a little while. So about kind of 6 months before, I'd met this gentleman, and it was just a model test shoot. I had no idea he had scars before he came. But at the test shoot, he actually had quite a few different scars, and he was sharing his story with me. So basically, he'd been stabbed from behind with a samurai sword, ended up in a coma for 6 months. I just found something really interesting about the way he kind of described his story to me, and kind of like, you know, the before and who he was now. And he also had a young child as well, so I actually ended up shooting him with his child later on too. But it was kind of, after having that conversation with him, I was kind of like, hang on, you know, there's something really interesting about it that I'd like to explore that more. So when this brief came up, I was kind of like, hang on, scars are kind of part of our history. The two kind of go together quite well, because it would make sense for the stories to go alongside the images. I think that's quite important. So even then, the concept was what it is now, even then, even though it's grown since then. So yeah, so we did it as an editorial assignment, and then we pitched it to another magazine, which was a menswear magazine, and did another shoot. But after I did that shoot, I kind of felt that I was still kind of limited in what I was producing. So I had this idea, but the magazine still wanted it to kind of, you know, the models to kind of fit their look, or to be like the kind of, you know, they kind of wanted it to just be what they saw as good looking people with scars.
Right.
And I wanted it to be more than that. I wanted to be able to just explore it completely with no limitations. So after that second shoot, I then decided to kind of run with it as a personal project, and continued adding shoot dates every month, and it's grown pretty steadily from there, really.
It is an amazing body of work in so many ways. The idea that these scars that people have on their bodies as a result of surgeries, accidents, issues with self-harm, or some sort of medical issue. There's a whole variety of scars and stories behind them. And in our culture, we have sort of assumed that scars have a negative connotation, not just in terms of being ugly, but also in terms of, in terms of film and television, they're often associated with the bad guy, right? If they have a scar, there's a lot of ill intent associated with them. And as a culture, we've grown to believe that scars are meant to be hidden or repaired.
Yeah.
Right, and that they basically are a thing to be ashamed of. And many of the people that you have photographed and interviewed sort of speak to that idea of, for a time, being ashamed and wanting to hide these things. And they get in front of your camera and they just bear it there. And it seems like for each of them, it's such a liberating and freeing experience to not feel like that they have to deny a part of themselves that really is an integral part of their story. Did you realize that was a big part of the power of this project?
So when I started, no, I probably didn't. So when I first started, obviously I knew there were stories behind people's scars. But I think until I started to kind of collect more stories, then you kind of start to see similar aspects in some of the stories, with the emotional side, kind of the mental healing some people go through. And I think the more portraits I took, I started to learn more about how people felt and maybe why they felt those ways. And so before I started the project as well, I did do research myself into kind of images of scars that had been taken before. And there are obviously images of scars by other people that exist out there. But what I found when I was looking at photos is I could kind of find lots and lots of photos which were kind of close-ups of scars. And they either felt kind of, very clinical, like medical photos, or they'd kind of been done to shock people. So, there's really kind of contrasty black and white photos. What I was seeing kind of time and time again is that it was just a scar. A lot of the time the person's face wasn't shown in the photo, or they were turned away from the camera. So it was like even the images were kind of reinforcing this idea that the person should be hidden or shouldn't be proud of them. So from the beginning of the project as well, I was very much, if I'm going to do these photos, they have to be of the person as well. So the person, because when I want people to look at the photos, I want them to get a sense of who the person is as well. Because while scars are a huge part of many of these people's lives, they are more than their scars as well. And I felt like I didn't really see that in other people's photos of scars, unless they're somewhere else on the internet and I haven't seen them. Yeah, no, that was really important to me as well. I kind of really wanted to get a sense of who the person was, and just to really kind of connect with them through my camera as well. Because I think sometimes, if we see somebody with a scar out in the street, many of us might not have seen scars or might not have seen someone that looks that way before. But I think, you have to remember there's a human there too. So if you kind of stare at someone or whatever, you're going to make them feel uncomfortable. But hopefully, people who see my images, so some people respond to me and they kind of say, so people who haven't got scars respond. They kind of say to me, thank you for kind of putting these images out there, because we've learned so much about kind of, how to approach people differently, or just like the visibility of scars. So, because many of them are underneath people's clothes as well. So some people don't know that they exist. They haven't seen them before. And hopefully with kind of more visibility, then people kind of start to see things differently as well. And they're perhaps not so shocked if they do see someone face to face that has got a scar as well. Sorry, that was really rambly. That's fine. That's fine, because I really appreciate what you're saying there, because I think that the project is twofold, and you're speaking to how other people observe people who are disfigured in some way, and how we pass a judgment on them. But one of the things that was sort of fascinating for me is how people choose to live with
with the scars.
Yeah.
And there's so much, I mean, there's some, you have one of a little girl who had a disfigurement of some sort. I can't remember off the top of my head, but she's fairly young. And she talks about just loving to dance. Oh, she's the one with the red arm, right?
Yeah.
For whatever reason, her arm is red while the rest of her coloration is relatively normal. And, she's just enjoying her life. She's not defined by that. And then you get to see someone who's much older, who may have had cancer and had a mastectomy or double mastectomy, and they and through whatever process, they come to that same place of joy where they don't feel anymore that this is something to be ashamed of or that they have to hide. That they're basically saying, this is just me, this is my body, and I accept it as it is. And there's just something really beautiful about that, especially considering that all of us have body issues, even if we don't possess scars, right? And to see someone else just say, hey, I'm not perfect, but I'm good. And that's what I really love about looking at the work and seeing the stories, because it forces us as viewers to really reconsider not only how we see the bodies of the people whose pictures we're looking at, but our own. Is that something that's happened for you as a result of the project?
Yeah, so I mean, I've had my own body hang-ups over the year. So when I was at university, I gained a lot of weight. It was it was a time where I was probably quite lonely and at points kind of, quite depressed, and I kind of comfort ate and stuff. But I think, since beginning of the project, and probably really across the past year, it might have something to do with age as well, maybe, who knows. But I've kind of very much become a lot more comfortable with who I am. So obviously I'm very much aware that I am a fat woman, but I'm also very much aware that even if I did want to change that, I would still visibly look like that for a considerable amount of time anyway. And the thing is, hating yourself or hating certain parts of you expends so much energy, and that's energy that can go to much more positive things. Because I've met women who kind of say, they don't go swimming, and men too, or they don't go right on the beach, or they don't go out with friends because of the way they feel about their body. And the thing is, you end up missing out on life, and life is more important than, I don't know, your freckles on your face. Do you know what I mean by that? It's
oh yeah, I know all too well. I mean, I've had body issues all my life, so it's just like I've declined to go swimming at the beach because I didn't want to take my shirt off. And that still part of my wiring, just because I've been doing it forever. But I think, there's a variety, like you just said perfectly. We rob ourselves of certain opportunities from life because we don't like how we look.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully a few people seeing the photos, hopefully it changes.
Help the Candid Frame to continue bringing you great conversations with some of the world's best photographers. You can do this by supporting our Patreon effort by committing as little as $5 or more a month. When you do this, you not only help us to meet the cost of production, but provide us the time and resources we need to bring you conversations you won't hear anywhere else. Sign up today by visiting patreon.com/The Candid Frame. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think part of what was really sort of interesting about these people who are sharing their scars is this sort of sense that not so much that they would be made fun of or criticized, but part of them, I think part of the battle is feeling like that because of these things, that they would not be able to be loved, to be not just by a romantic partner, but that somehow these scars and the stories behind the scars, because some of the stories are really heartbreaking, because they're due. Some of them are due to depression or abusive relationships, and it seems like part and parcel of being able to accept one's own scars is, being able to say that I am worthy of love and respect and dignity, and then that by posing for you in front of the camera, it's them declaring it not just to the people looking at the photograph, but to themselves.
Yeah, absolutely, to themselves. So I know I'm very much aware some of the people that I photograph probably don't like the photos I take of them because they haven't, for many people they love their photos, but there are some people that don't like their photos as well. But the whole process and the fact that they've actually done that gives them more than the photo itself as well, which is quite interesting too. So for some people it very much is an act of kind of saying, this is me, this is who I am now, I deserve what I want, what I need, and where other people obviously love their photos as well. But, I think it's a big thing for a lot of people to do, and there's a huge amount of trust people kind of put in me, not just in revealing their scars, but they reveal themselves, in front of my camera. And a lot of themselves, and that takes a lot of balls to kind of do and kind of say, I'm ready to do this, not just in the fact that it's being shared publicly online, but the fact that you are actually coming to the studio, taking your clothes off in front of a photographer that you've spoken to online and bearing all. That's it's something that kind of I definitely find really humbling, kind of like as a photographer, that so many people are willing to kind of share that much with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have great respect for the people who've chosen to do this, because God knows, I don't know if I'd be ready to.
Yeah.
But that's a good point. You get people to walk through the door and they're nervous, they're anxious. Getting them through the door, or them making the choice to come through the door, is a big one. But getting in front of a camera, getting in front of a stranger with an assistant and all your equipment there, it's still an intimidating process. So what is your sort of practice? What do you do in order to help them to be comfortable with the process?
So on the shoot day, so normally when I arrange the shoot dates, we kind of book, several portrait sessions, and some people kind of stay at the studio for longer. We kind of have like a sofa area. So people normally come in and normally they handwrite their stories first in exercise books. And I always do it that way around because I think that gives people kind of like a chance to sit down and kind of think about what they want to say as well. I normally have my dog with me as well. She's a cross between like a whippet and a black lab. So she's quite small and she's very, very good with people, especially when they're nervous. So she kind of goes up and just puts her head on people's knees and things like that. Obviously that doesn't work for everyone, but she is quite good as well. And I think, when it comes to taking the photo, I don't make a huge deal of it. It's kind of like, a lot of the time the conversation is kind of like, hi, how are you? Are you nervous? How are you feeling? Quite often it's kind of practical in a way as well, because I'm kind of stood there and I'm like, okay, so can you show me where your scars are? A lot of the time people have obviously sent me photos, but once you're there in the studio, you've got to kind of like work out where they are on their body. There's some people I photographed who's got scars in multiple places, and we've had to do weird and wonderful poses to just kind of show them. So you kind of end up laughing because sometimes, quite often, like awkward laughter kind of ends up in real laughter as well. Sometimes my assistant is stood there with the reflector, waving it in the air to kind of create wind. That's normally pretty good at making people laugh as well. So, but I think also as well, which is I don't read the stories from the exercise book until afterwards. So that's just something I've always done. Obviously, I do know kind of elements of people's stories before photographing them, but normally I haven't read the full extent of what they choose to write until after the shoot, when I kind of come to typing them up. And that was something I kind of decided to do quite early on as well, because I think, if I was kind of stood there reading someone's story before photographing them, I think that would kind of, that might make them feel a little bit awkward as well. And also, I think right at the beginning of the subject, at the project, it was kind of a new subject matter that I was approaching as well. And I was kind of like, I didn't want to be, I don't know if biased is the right word, but I didn't want to read someone's story before photographing them and kind of, I didn't want it to impact the way I photographed them, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense, yeah.
Exist to support the photographs, but the stories are very much the model's words, and the portraits I take is how I kind of see them on that day. So it's kind of based off their personality, my interactions with them. So I guess it's kind of like a merging of two voices, really. It's kind of how I see them, and their stories are very much their own words.
What's fascinating about the whole series is that you see people there with relatively small scars, and then you have others whose bodies are dominated by whatever scarring or damage that's been had to their body. And it was really kind of fascinating to think that regardless of the size and the percentage of their body that has been impacted by the scars, the emotional weight of it is sometimes comparable.
Yeah. So I think even some of the smallest scars are, they've deeply affected the person, as well as, the people that have got, there's somebody in the project who's got like 97% burns. Yeah, no, it's very, very personal how each person feels about theirs. Because at the beginning of the project, I could have been like, oh, I'm only going to shoot significant scars, but even a small scar to somebody is significant. So I kind of really wanted to kind of embrace as many scars as I could, and as many people as I could too, when I started shooting.
Tell me about the choice to share these images on social media, because photographing these people for a personal project, I think, is one thing.
Yeah.
Making the choice to say that I am going to actively share these images with the world, is quite a leap. And I think that, especially for the people who have probably spent most of their lives trying to not be looked at.
Yeah.
So tell me about the choice to do it that way, and how have the people who you photographed found that experience?
Before starting the project, I used social media a lot. I shared most of my work via social media. I think in this day and age, even with personal work, commercial work, editorial work, quite often we're kind of expected to share it. I don't know whether expected to, but we also have the opportunity to share it straight away. And I think as well, the people I was photographing, a lot of them kind of very much had like an all or nothing approach, like, if we're going to do this, let's do it kind of thing. So everyone was aware, that images would be shared on social media. I didn't really comprehend how many people might see the images, because you kind of don't think beyond the people that maybe follow you or follow your work already, but obviously that can grow. Very, very early on in the project, I posted a picture of a girl called Isabella. That was the first time from the project an image just went all across the internet within like days. I can remember Isabella texting me literally like, oh my God, I can't believe this has literally gone everywhere. And I didn't expect it to either, because I was just like, I'm just going to share this because I like this picture. She's got a lovely story as well, because she kind of talks about how beautiful she feels. And I think, when that photo went out, so that was in May 2017, I think the reason it did go kind of so far is because I think it was just the nature of the photo and how confident she looked, and kind of, it was an unapologetic photo. It was her as she was. So that was the second shoot for the project. On the first shoot for the project, I took really, really beautiful portraits. But I think when I look back at them now, I can still see that I'm quite I'm a little bit nervous of how I'm shooting and not totally trusting myself either. And I think that's partly because it was a new project, because I was very aware that it was a sensitive subject matter and I kind of wanted to do people justice. I also didn't want to make people feel worse about their scars through the photos I was taking, because I was like, it could very much go that way as well. And before photographing Isabella, we'd only spoken a little bit on kind of social media. I think we contacted each other through Instagram. I think she was probably the first person that actually kind of totally let go in front of my camera as part of the project. So I think that was kind of like a point for me as well, where I was kind of like, I kind of understood what I was doing a little bit more, so I kind of trusted what I was doing, and I think that's developed even more since then as well. But I think that was definitely kind of a point where I was like, this is something I need to do, not just for the people involved, but also for me as a photographer, and kind of, because I've kind of explored myself a lot in terms of how I work and how I communicate with people, how I connect with people. And, a large amount of that has come from the portraits I've produced as part of the project.
I think one of the things that's really moving are the comments that people make when they see the photographs.
Yeah.
Especially from people who have faced like similar medical issues or have similar scars. And it seems like they're so encouraged and emboldened as a result of seeing someone else who's similar to them sharing themselves in that way.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's built a community, I guess, is the word I'd use, in that, people kind of support each other, people talk to each other. I think many of the people taking part in the project as well, they have their photo taken because it's the portrait they wanted to see when they kind of got their scars or when they were growing up. It's something for them to kind of look up to. So kind of some people who are parents as well kind of message me after they found their account. And, sometimes they're like, I've got a child who's kind of got a scar, who's been in an accident, and they're then able to kind of show the child, look, this lady's a bit older than you and she's got a similar scar to you. So I think it's very much a sense of kind of sharing experiences as well, and realising someone else has been through something similar to you kind of validates how you feel as well. I think it also shows where you can go, because a lot of people are kind of at different stages in their stories as well. So I think there's definitely something I think in every story that somebody can relate to. And I think, that definitely shows kind of through the comments and how people kind of communicate with the project. Yeah, I think it's really interesting kind of see how people kind of support each other and connect, with each other through the images and the stories.
So as the work has gotten out there and you've garnered press in a variety of different places online and in magazines, how has that affected you as a professional photographer doing, the other work that you've been doing?
So when I was shooting Behind the Scars, I actually made a decision to stop shooting editorial work for a while, because I think I just felt like I wasn't getting what I wanted from doing that work at that point in time. And it's only actually over the last couple of months I've actually kind of gone back to doing a few editorial pieces and kind of working with different people. So I did kind of very much throw myself into the project. Yeah, I mean, it's been a huge part of my life just from the past 2 years, and it still is now. It takes a huge amount of organising, a lot of admin, because I'm producing the project single-handedly, which I think a lot of people don't realise, actually. So I think sometimes when people see the project, they're kind of like, oh, there must be a whole team of people behind this. There isn't. There's just me, and I do the casting, the producing, the editing. I do have an assistant that helps me on the day, but because it's such a personal subject matter and series, it's kind of, it's a process that I have to be there from the beginning to the end. I don't want someone who wants to have their portrait taken to be emailing, my reception desk or whatever, because it's not the same, is it? They need to be able to communicate with me directly as well. I think that's something that social media has allowed us to do as well. We can get much closer to the people behind work as well. And I think that's something that changed when I was doing this project as well. I think when I was doing like fashion and editorial work before, nobody really cared about who I was. Not saying they didn't care, but obviously I was credited, my name was there. But since like starting the project, I realised kind of people wanted to know more about who I was, why I was doing these things. And, there's been a couple of points where I've kind of, I've been portrayed by other artists and I've done other things too. And I also think that came back to the kind of trust thing as well. So I was kind of like, I'm asking people to bear all for me, but how much do they actually know about me as well? So that's been quite an interesting process as well, both kind of professionally and personally, is I've probably kind of shared a lot more about myself than I probably would have done if I hadn't have done the project, I guess.
Yeah, I saw that painting that had been done of you, that nude painting that had been done of you, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful painting.
Yeah, it's really beautiful, but I don't think I've seen myself in that much detail before, so...
But like you said, drawing inspiration from other people and just sort of reaffirming that idea that I have nothing to be ashamed of. This is just who I am. This is what I look like. And sort of shirking off this idea that just by the nature of who you are and the body that you exist in, that you're doing anything wrong that is deserving of shame or a rejection or any of that stuff. You realize how much BS that is, and how the power to make the choice for ourselves is right there. And when you see other people who may physically have scars or damage that are much more pronounced than anything that I may have, it gives me a perspective in terms of, do I really want to loathe myself because of my gut? Right?
Yeah.
It's like, what do I gain by doing that? What do I rob myself of? And I think that this work, beyond people who have similar issues with their bodies, I think it gives us all a healthy alternative of how we can accept ourselves and as a result accept others. Because I think when we don't accept some aspect of ourselves, that just opens the door for us to be critical of other people.
Yeah, I think as humans we can be so critical of other people, and I think we've all been there. Sometimes, I've done it as a teenager. Once I was uni, I've criticised other people, and I think a lot of the time when we criticise other people, it is down to how we feel about ourselves. When you're in a place where you feel bad, I think we automatically then want to make others feel bad too. And I think, if you are in a place where you're kind of criticising people, or you find yourself doing it, it's always worth asking yourself why. None of us are perfect, and we do often automatically judge people. But I think it's worth kind of questioning, or even just recognising when you do that and kind of trying to work out why. Because that's something I do with myself as well. If I do find that I've kind of fallen into an old way of thinking, I question why. I think as well as, so a lot of people kind of speak to me about kind of how they feel about their bodies and stuff. And I think as well, it doesn't change overnight. So whilst we have hang-ups, we might feel better about them one day than the next. But, it kind of evolves over time as well. Because I think a lot of people sometimes kind of say to me, they're like, oh, so when was the moment where you suddenly became comfortable with yourself or suddenly loved yourself? And I was like, it doesn't really work like that. You don't suddenly wake up and you're like, oh, I'm a new person. Do you know what I mean? It's
a continual work in progress.
Yeah. We all are, really. None of us are, perfection doesn't exist at the end of the day. We're all flawed or whatever. We're all different. we all question our own self-worth and how we feel about ourselves. I think there's nothing wrong in questioning that from time to time, but I think questioning why you feel negative about it then kind of makes you start to pull it apart and kind of adjust how you think and how you see yourself.
Yeah, that's great.
Going a bit deeper there.
Well, my last question that I ask each guest is I ask them to recommend another photographer for our listeners to discover and explore, and it can be anyone, someone you've long admired or someone you've recently discovered. So who would that one photographer be and why?
Ooh. So I really like Jack Davison's work. He's a brilliant photographer, so he's worth looking at.
And what kind of work does he do?
He does a lot of kind of like portraits. Some are kind of abstract. Some of his work is kind of dark. He does some kind of fashion work. I think he's someone's work I've just known for a while, and I just personally like it. I mean, we're very different photographers, but his works, he's very talented.
Well, I look forward to checking out his work, and just thank you so much for sharing your work, for putting it out there, and for making time for us today. I really enjoyed getting to learn more about you and the project.
Thank you.
Thanks to Sophie for sharing her time and story with us. You can find out more about her and her work by visiting sophie-mayanne.com. And to be the voice that introduces the episode like Scott Allen did this week, just send us an audio file recorded on your phone, tablet, or computer, saying something like, "This is Nick Carraway from Duluth, Minnesota, and this is The Candid Frame." Say it at least a couple of times so we have a take to choose from, and include 3 to 4 seconds of silence with your voice to help us clean up the audio. Also, make sure to include a link to your website, blog, or Instagram feed when you send it to info@thecandidframe.com. I also have a variety of workshops I'm leading in the coming months, including a 2-day workshop in June at the Los Angeles Center of Photography and a week-long cultural experience in Tokyo, Japan. We've also just added a workshop in Vancouver, Canada in August, which I'll be teaching alongside Olaf Staba. Sign up soon, as spaces are limited, and you'll find out more about these on the website and the show notes. And if you want to get a sense of my teaching style and approach to photography, you should check out my YouTube channel, where I offer critiques and evaluations of photography submitted by TCF listeners who contribute to the Candid Frame Flickr poll. You can check out the TCF Flickr poll and our YouTube channel by clicking on the show notes and the website. My book, Making Photographs, Developing a Personal Visual Workflow, is now available. You can purchase it today and receive 40% off the list price when you order it from the Rocky Nook website. Use the promo code Pirello40 at checkout to take advantage of that discount. And if you want to keep up with all things Candid Frame, sign up for our mailing list, and you'll receive 3 free copies of my previously published ebooks. And if you like what you've been hearing on the show, please take the time today to write a review in the iTunes, Spotify, the Google Podcast Store, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you write a review on a blog post, let me know and send me a link, because I would really love to thank you on air. Thanks to Sumilux 1.4 for their 5-star review. You can also support the show by making a monthly contribution through Patreon, or you can make a one-time contribution via PayPal. You'll find links for both in the show notes and the website. Thanks to Hans Jogan Rowe for his recent contribution. And if you want to easily access every episode of The Candid Frame, download the Candid Frame app. It's available for both Apple iOS and Android, and it's free. Download it today, and you'll find it where everything else is in the show notes or the website at thecandidframe.com. And we also have an Alexa app, so if you have one of those smart devices, download the skill and listen to the show that way. The Candid Frame's audio engineer is Martin Taylor, who you can find at theothermartintaylor.com. The show's senior producer is Cynthia Parker, and our music is from Kevin MacLeod, whose royalty-free music can be found at incompetech.com. And this is Ibarian X, and this is The Candid Frame.